we were discussing missing the past, and I said, well, one way that I coped with it was I read a lot of Yuri, and the person looks at me and is like, Ria, are you prescribing me Yuri? And I said, no, I can't prescribe anything, but yes. Hi, welcome, my friends, fiends, and unsavory beings, to the second Ask a Therapist radio show. I'm RiaRosella, the therapist in question, but I'm not your therapist, but I can help with some general questions. So, again, just for the future, if you have a question, please see the description. I will answer all questions eventually. Also, I'm looking for story submissions for people to interview too. There's a Google form for that. So, on to the show. All right. So, we have first up Autumn, she, her. The question is, so I'm a transgender minor in a deep red state. I've already come out to my parents. They were supportive. Yay! Colon 3. So now I'm worried about how do I socially transition. Should you socially transition? That's the neat part. You don't. I'm kidding, obviously. And what I mean by that is you can, but I don't know enough to tell you what's safe and not safe for your situation. So let me just talk generally. So, generally, as someone in a deep red state, you need to ask yourself some questions. Are you in a blue dot in a deep red state? Are you in like the far out country in a deep red state? Those are some things that are needed to determine what is safe and what isn't safe. So ask yourself those questions. If you're deep in the country, you need to be fairly along on a transition journey to feel safe enough to present in public. If you're in a blue dot in a deep red state, you might be able to socially transition quite early. As I said in the first Ask a Therapist video, which by the way you should watch it if you haven't, social transition is a thing that can be done in multiple steps. Obviously, you can socially transition on the internet, but we're talking about in person. And the first step is be socially transitioned in spaces that are safe. You have a supportive family. So many of us don't. So that's somewhere where you can actually be socially transitioned. Maybe you have some very good friends that you can present as yourself with. That's another place you can socially transition. And as you go in your journey, you can add more and more spaces. Schools right now, sadly, in America, are not a place that I think we can socially transition because, frankly, the current administration has kind of made it impossible to recognize gender identity, especially in a red state. In sanctuary states, you might be able to do that. But in a deep red state, there is probably zero chance that you can socially transition at school. So as a minor, this is going to be in spaces where you are safe, in spaces where you are among people who love and care about you. You're going to end up living a double life for a little while. And I'm sad to say that it's just kind of necessary due to the current climate that we are in the world right now. But that doesn't mean that it always has to be that way. As you become more yourself, maybe you get a little older and you get a job. Maybe in that space, you can definitely be yourself. Maybe as you get older, academically, you can transition into college, especially if it's a private and not a state school, because state schools might still have some of that shenanigans going on. Obviously, it also has to be a private school that is affirmative. Look at the policies of the schools that you're looking at as you start getting to the point of university. So, to summarize, you can transition around people who see you. You can transition further as you get along in the process. You can slowly change your body if you're able to get on hormones in the current climate, and that's right for you and your medical journey with your care providers and parents and people who love you. As you start to look yourself, perhaps then, Autumn, you can actually be more out in public. You don't have to worry about people doing things. And especially as a minor, I know plenty of teenager, even if they didn't get on puberty blockers, because they're younger and their body is just more plastic, they have great results with medical transition. So I think that, or at least I should say, I'm hopeful that you should be able to present publicly and not have it be a big deal. The one big no area right now is the school system, sadly. There's not really a lot we can do about the way that the federal government is right now and how it's influencing the states. So that's what I have for you. All of that general information. If you want kind of a more of a breakdown guide of like certain areas on how to go about it, I've spoke about it in my other videos, and I hope that you are able to give them a watch. Thanks, Autumn. Let's see, next on our list we have here in my floating list that you can't see, lol, is Annabelle, she, they. Any advice for someone who has found themselves in a polycule that doesn't end up fitting them? They're not bad people, just mismatches in life expectations and what we want out of life. Well, that's exactly one of the things that I find interesting about poly. So thank you for your question. You can have mismatches in what you want in life and still have relationship with people. Maybe it won't be a whole polycule because that's a big mismatch to have that many partners that are mismatched. But you can still have relationship. It's ultimately up to you and how you want to live your life. I often talk with people about non-escalator relationships, but in order to understand that, I have to define what an escalator relationship is. And what an escalator relationship is a relationship where you have the standard life trajectory progression. So, you first start with, maybe you meet at a bar or in a VR cafe, then you start dating, then you go up to like maybe you're going steady, and then, or in any of these processes, you have sex, say I love you, those are kind of the more intimacy, and then we go up to like eventually maybe you move in together, and then we go up to marriage, and then we go up to like maybe you get a kid, either make it the old fashioned way or adopt, and then maybe you eventually like get the house with the dog and the fence and whatever, or these can be in different orders. And then finally, you retire to Florida. That's like the cis heteronormative standard relationship escalator. And it's called a relationship escalator because when you go up one level, you don't go backwards. You can't go from I love you to I don't love you, or I'm starting to have sex with you and then I suddenly stop and I'm not interested at all. Those are typically in the typical relationship kind of structure not done. So that's an escalator relationship. Let's talk about a non-escalator relationship. A non-escalator relationship is a relationship that is whatever you want it to be. You can make a relationship be what you want it to be and nothing else. There are there's a table that I usually refer to that I'll put in the description of the video that has these various factors in what you look at when you're talking about non-escalator relationships. You have the friendship dynamic. What do you want out of friendship? Is it important to you? Is it not important to you in this relationship? Do you just want like sexual chemistry and not emotional? Which then that goes to the next one, emotional vulnerability. How vulnerable do you want to be in this relationship? Is this a surface level one, or is this a deep, deep connection? Time. How much time do you want to spend with this person? Once a week for an evening, once a month for a long time, every day? Like, how much time do you want to spend? Interrelating. Do you want to spend time with this partner's other partners or your other partners, your friends, your family? How much time do you spend with theirs or yours and all of that all blended together? What does it look like? How blended is your life going to be? Why? Why are you doing it? What feels good? Why are you engaging in this non-escalator relationship? Sex. What is your desire for sex for this relationship? What is the other person's desires? How exclusive, non-exclusive? Those types of questions. Happiness. What does happiness look like in this relationship? Labels. What kind of labels are you going to put on it? Husband, wife, girlfriend, date friend, them friend, etc. Security. What does security and commitment look like in this relationship? And finally, the future. What is like the boring, crazy, anything future look like in this relationship? And often people will say at the beginning of a relationships, I don't know. If you don't know, then you need to make sure that you don't accidentally make it the standard escalator relationship, or the queer version or the poly version. If you Google, there's a couple different versions of it. Like, you have to make sure that you don't have this assumed escalator. Try to make the relationship what you want to make. Now, you, Annabelle, you said that you were in a situation where you thought it wasn't going to work. Again, can't tell you what to do exactly, but I'm curious if perhaps you can interface with these people on some level. And then, if you can't interface with them at all, then it would look like ending the relationship and detangling your lives, right? You try to like do that amicably. You try to say, hey, I think y'all are awesome. I'm your friend. I want to be your friend if that's what you want. But ultimately, you can't be in a relationship with them anymore. And that's okay. Ask yourself what you want and if these people can give it to you. And if they can't give it to you on any level, then you're not going to be in a relationship with them. But if they can give you some of it, maybe there is some relationship to be found. And that's what I would recommend. Ask yourself if there's anything you can get out of it that you would love, that you would enjoy. And if not, well, then I think you know what to do. Thank you so much, Annabelle. All right. Brandon, he, him, or they, them, asks, I'm autistic and I have been struggling in college. Is it worth looking into switching into the trades? And if you know, are the trades somewhat friendlier to neurodivergent people? It depends on your neurodivergent if trades are better. Let me explain. So, say you have uber ADHD. A lot of the education brainy think jobs are going to be really, really hard for you because it requires constant attention and it's not very stimulating. And you're just kind of like trying to make your brain go, oh, do the thing. But a trade, like, maybe that's a really physical job and that feels really good. And you can like really, really get to work on that and you can feel very focused. However, say you're autistic and you can do the brainy work, but the sensory intensity of the trade is very hard to deal with. I know personally, I did the service industry for a very long time and I actually loved it. I loved seeing people's faces smile when I waited on them and they did a good job, or I also worked in a deli and I made them a good sandwich and I would get to know them and they'd come and the regulars and like kind of having that cheers where everybody knows your name, bum bum bum. That kind of happens when you work in the service industry and I really, really, really enjoyed it. However, sad to say, my body couldn't take it, and also it wasn't very sensory well either. I have some physical disability stuff that makes it harder to do the labor required for a trade of some kind. So, those are the things you have to weigh when you're making the decision. Are you the ADHD person and you kind of have concerns on both sides of the fence? You have to kind of weigh, all right, which one is the one that I want? Which one do I think I could deal with more regularly? Does my brain like just scream at me anytime I try to do something that requires a lot of mental focus and effort? Does my body get just so overwhelmed if I'm in an uncomfortable sensory situation? You got to weigh that. But let's think of some traits. I know in general, uh, welding, I have heard from my people that I have interacted with throughout all of my experience, is a very useful trade in general, but also because you work for a long time and then you stop. And that can be really, really good for the neurodivergent person, because you have that, all right, I'm putting a lot of work in, and then I get to lay fallow for a while. I am going to be a little YouTube friendly when I talk about the next trade, especially considering it is complicated depending on how you do it, if it's within the realms of legality. So I will just say being an entertainer of the adult variety, whatever that may look like. I know lots of autistic people, and I know I cited him in my last one, but I'm going to cite him again. Dr. Devin Price, person who wrote Unmasking Autism, he talks about that a lot of autistic people enjoy that line of work because you can get a lot of money in a very short time and then have that time to rest. Yes, there might be some sensory stuff that would be unpleasant with that, but again, that's the stuff you have to weigh. Plumbing, electrician, like any physical trade, they all have their ups and downs, various things that you need to know, memorize, do. Really look into what you think that your body can handle and your brain can handle. And that's what I would say to Brandon concerning this issue of to trade or not to trade. That is the question. We now have Camera Sue, she, they. Can autism cause / be a factor of being sex repulsed? I am a sex repulsed ace, and I've always wanted to understand why. I am the way I am, and if neurodivergent plays any part in it. The short answer is yes, it most certainly can. We just talked about sensory stuff. That's a big part of it. Also, transitions. You know, if you are a autist, having transitions happening all the time with sex, that can be so frustrating and so hard to deal with because you have the transition of foreplay, you have the transition of doing the thing, you have the transition of not doing the thing, you have the transition of, if you climax, dealing with the high and then not being high afterwards. That's a lot of transitions, and some people just go, nope, don't want anything to do with that. But let's say, hypothetically, you are a sex repulsed person, but you want to engage in it. How would one go about that? Well, one would go about that by trying to manage the barriers to engaging in sex. For example, there is the adolescent adult sensory profile, which you can have a clinician do, although I think you might be able to find it on the internet, but maybe you won't be able to quite get all you could get out of it if you had a clinician do it for you. But you can do this sensory profile to find what are things that are very sensory difficult for you and what are things that are not very difficult for you. What are you very hypo, like I don't feel it at all, and what are you very hypersensitive about? What are you sensory seeking towards, and what are you sensory avoidant towards? And kind of work on figuring out how to manage that sensory stuff. There are ways that people engage in sexual activity even while being sex repulsed. Maybe they engage in some extra, how would I say this in a YouTube friendly sense? Extra intense with lots of sensory seeking fun things, but aren't actually like bodies and fluids. Those are some ways that people who want to engage in this may do it, or how they can please a partner potentially if they don't want to actually like directly be doing the sex. you know, that's lots of different ways that people can learn how to interface with this because it's important to a lot of humans. And if you do the partner thing, sometimes we have to figure it out, right? So that's what I would say to Cam Rasu. And I hope that no matter what your exact circumstances are, that you are happy with your lack or not lack of said activity. Oh, goodness. Okay. How about we go into Winona, she, her? What are some of the ways you know of in which queer individuals connect with one another online or in person? I find it difficult to find community with other trans people. Well, there are lots of spaces that you can find community with trans people. If you're in VR, as I said in probably several videos, there is a great trans presence at the Trans Academy. There's also the Rainbow Library. There's also, hell, my Discord. For $1 a month, you can join my patron Discord. And there are almost exclusively trans people there. Not every single person, to my knowledge, but a lot of them are trans there. So you can connect to people. There are spaces, but I am guessing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it isn't necessarily about the finding the space where there is the potential to connect. It has more to do with I don't know how to connect. And well, that is something that is much more complicated. Jess McCabe, in her book, How to ADHD, describes how we as she was mostly talking about ADHD people, but I would say it kind of applies to autistic people as well. We as ADHD people, will say, really struggle with making friends, in part because we don't really understand how the friend thing works. We often are trying to find friends to do things, but actually it needs to be the other way around. We need to do things to find friends. And basically, we think we have to have these really intimate relationships in order to connect to other people. Nope, got to start the other way. She describes them as participatory relationships. So basically, a participatory relationship is a relationship where you have agreed to do a thing. And when you do a thing together, the people that are there, you're allowed to do that. And you will, like, eventually meet people and create more intimate relationships. Dr. Price, in his book, Unlearning Shame, there's a table at about page 230 that says how to make friends as an autistic social butterfly. And one of the most important things in that table is what he calls Mel's rule, which is from a friend of his named Mel. You don't have to think stuff, do stuff, or say stuff. Whenever you go out, you don't have to think, feel, do, say, whatever when you're out. You're just out. And he talks about kind of throughout that table of giving something 3 shakes at doing a thing, because often we're very nervous the very first time we try to do a new activity. So giving it 3 tries in order to try to actually make it work is very useful. Often we're looking for a us-shaped hole in a community, and that doesn't exist. You have to find people that you vibe with and make connections. And then through those connections, community is formed. Maybe you try going to the Trans Academy and you just hang out different times, at least 3 times, and maybe you notice someone whose energy you vibe with. And so because you're somewhat familiar with them, you feel a little bit more comfortable introducing yourself. And then say you go out and go to a convention or something. Again, you do that a couple conventions throughout the year, and you kind of meet some of the same people, and you feel familiar with them. And you do that, and maybe you do other things, and you notice, oh, this person relates to this person, and this person relates to this person. And all of a sudden, a community is formed around you. That is how you find connection. It's not through just finding a magic place for you. You have to make individual connections to make friends. All right, next question. Alicia, that's what I'm going with. Sorry if it's not correct. She, her. One of the most universal feelings I have seen amongst my trans siblings is that we all wish we had figured out ourselves sooner. As someone who realized a little later than most, it has given me a fair amount of grief that I've had to accept. However, I don't have to accept it for those of us yet to come out. My question is, how do we best support and help those who are still closeted to themselves have the future we wish we had, not just for people we know, but for our larger communities? That's a really, really good question. And I can honestly say it's complicated. If someone isn't ready to come out to themselves, how can we help them, right? I think being visible is a very important thing. Having people like me talking in front of cameras and saying it's okay to be trans, jazz hands, is very useful because, when I was young, we didn't have that, or at least not really. I remember one of the things that kept me in the closet for so long was being scared that people would see me as Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror. And ugh, that was just that image of someone seeing me as this person I'm not really kept me in the closet for a really long time. So being the people we are is very, very valuable. Not hiding despite the current climate is very valuable. I think there isn't a way to help someone come out if they're not ready. Now, granted, if you know that they're they're trans and they're not just out completely, you have some things you can do. So, you can support them in their journey, help them feel comfortable, guide them through things that you wish you had at the beginning of the process. Create spaces for them to be themselves, whether that's you interacting with them as themselves, whether that's you going out with them, whether that's you introducing them to your friends. Like, create space, I guess, to summarize. And then I would say there's always listening, being a good friend. Let them process with you. If you want to do the work to help people come out, that is very good work. But it's a lot of work, and a lot of people really don't want to come out because they're scared. So it takes a lot of patience, a lot of care, and that's how you're going to help people come out. But they have to be out to themselves first. You can't do anything else. The whole missing parts of your past. I once had a discussion with someone. They asked me, or I don't remember how we got started on it, but we were discussing missing the past. And I said, well, one way that I coped with it was I read a lot of Yuri. And the person looks at me and is like, Ria, are you prescribing me Yuri? And I said, no, I can't prescribe anything, but yes, it really helps because you kind of vicariously get the experience of what it was like to be a young person. And in this context, we were both people who loved women, a young person who was in relationship with women, even though we couldn't be when we were younger. And so you can have that a little bit vicariously by consuming media. So if you're still struggling with mourning what you've missed, you can get it through other means. Well, the next question is very related today. I guess coming out is a big theme for these. Just Saturn, they, them, pre-HRT trans femme here. How do you go about transitioning when you're only out in certain areas of your life? I've been flirting with scheduling an HRT consultation for years now, but I'm afraid of how the family might react if they found out. Well, about that. Like Brooke said in my interview with her, which by the way you should watch, I'll put it in an iCard, you can't live for other people. You can't bend yourself to be someone you're not. And you deserve to be happy, even if it would upset other people. So let's just kind of put that up front. It's always going to be a leap of faith. I'm sorry to say, that's kind of how it is. You have to see if the benefits outweigh the costs for you and go for it. As I said in my first Ask a Therapist video, trans feminine people have this opportunity of being able to transition in secret. I have found with people that I have experienced in various capacities that some people choose to just do it. Start transitioning, and then the family basically, yeah, they might be mad or at a minimum hurt that you didn't tell them, but the decision is already made. And some people find that that's the only way they can do it. Basically, they have the safety of being like, well, you can't stop me. And that feels really good. Some people will go eons and eons trying to build up the courage to talk to their family when they're just so anxious. And eventually they do, but then sometimes they regret it because it took so long to talk to their family before they let themselves do the thing. There is no silver bullet. You have to make the decision for you. and if it's right for you. But what I will say is you're going to make it eventually. If you've already got to the point where you want to schedule it and you know it's right for you, pull the Band-Aid. It's kinder, and at least in my opinion, to tell them, because then they can make a decision. When you're holding that back, when you're holding back that thing from them, you are making the decision for them. They deserve to make the decision on how they feel about it themselves, and you deserve to know how they feel so you can get a true, vulnerable, good connection with them, not just a superficial relationship with a mask that isn't you. And again, I am talking generally. I'm not trying to call out just Saturn here, because again, it is a big thing that a lot of people in our community do. But avoidance will not spare the pain. It can only increase the total amount of pain because you're in pain right now. So I hope you can find a way, no matter which path you choose, to become the person you want to be, no matter what that is. Anonymous, she, her. How would one go about explaining not feeling dysphoria due to pure dissociation of reality, despite the fact that I have been on estrogen for 2 years and have results? I suffer from a dissociative disorder, and due to the nature of my past, everything gender-wise just feels numb. If you have a dissociative disorder, work on trying to get through the dissociative disorder. So that's one thing. Editing Ria here, and I was listening back to that, and I was like, gosh, that sounds a little harsh. It was like I was saying, just get better, bro. Gosh. So, since I'm not your therapist, let me give you some general things that you can do to help with dissociation. First, if you have autism or ADHD, like a lot of us do, there's a website called Feelings Found. They have these fans that you can use to help you with externalizing your feelings and like looking at it and trying to figure it out. I've already recommended it before, but the Transsomatics podcast is a very useful tool for connecting with yourself, and somatic therapy in general, if you can find a therapist to help you with that, can help you with dissociation, as well as mindfulness. And again, this is making some assumptions, but if you're an autistic or ADHD person, we have traditionally find mindfulness is something that is very difficult. Usually that is because we're trying to open ourselves to the universe, but we're already like that. We actually need to practice coming down to a point and being very focused. But it's an active focused. You don't want to accidentally dissociate while you're trying to become mindful. All of that being said, I have found that my neurodivergent people that I work with tend to work better doing reflection and cognitive, which is kind of that externalization fan thing, at first, and then building more of the bottom up somatic and mindful practices. But that's how you help with dissociation in general. Past Ria is going to focus on the dysphoria side of this question. Back to her. Because then you can feel the positive feelings and then maybe also the dysphoria on the negative side so you can do something about it. So that just seems like a straightforward way of saying some of that. Now, you are allowed to not feel dysphoria, and honestly, a lot of people don't feel like capital D dysphoria. They have lowercase d numbness about gender, and that is a form of dysphoria. So I guess just kind of explaining it like that. That's all. You have feelings that you're not feeling about gender. It's probably dysphoria. I guess what I'm saying is you're allowed. Like, you got this. Okay. Jubal, he, him. What was it like to be an ally before you realized you were queer/trans? Well, for me personally, I was an ally to my ex-husband who was trans before I was trans, or before I came out as trans, I should say. I also had this like weird feeling of like, do I want to be him because of this like trans thing that I didn't understand? And I thought maybe he was just neat, and there was this like weird tension between us that I didn't quite get in that sense. And now I know it's because I envied him being trans. So that's one thing about being an ally as a trans person. Regarding my queerness before I came out as queer, I'm going to be really honest. I wasn't an ally. There is a lot of shame about talking about this, so I want to be vulnerable and say it. A lot of people, before they come out, have internalized queer phobia, and they may even do unkind or hurtful things because of that internalized queer phobia. I sadly, me, Ria, activist, social worker, therapist extraordinaire, was phobic before I came to terms with myself. I hurt feelings. I said unkind things. I wasn't an ally before I came out as queer. And now I know better. And now I'm doing better. And now I'm trying to help. It doesn't erase any harm that might be lingering from what I've said historically. I hope those people have healed, and most of them have, since I do know those people. But I did things I'm not proud of. And I know that my good deeds do not erase that. But I would like to use a metaphor of a glass of water. If you imagine a glass of water with a drop of ink in it, it's colored. And, no matter what you do, that ink will be in that water. But I would like to say that with time, maybe the volume of water increases, or the glass gets bigger because you're putting more and more water in, and you need to pour it into a new glass and then pour it into a new glass. And more time goes on, we heal. That's why the whole time heals all wounds thing is a phrase. The same can be said for atoning. If you learn better and do better, yes, technically that little tiny bit of ink is in there. But if you have this big giant like fishbowl glass, I don't think it's tinged anymore. And that's kind of the point. It is not an indelible mark. You are not holding a scarlet letter because you used to be phobic before you came out as trans, or before you were ableist, before you realized you were neurodivergent, or whatever. When you know better, you can do better. And that's what I have done myself. I think that's a perfect note to end this video on. So, my fiends, if you have gotten to the end of this video, I want fire emojis and the question that you thought was most helpful. Let's put that in the chat. I am so glad that you're here with me, and please submit your stories, your questions. I will get to them in future installments on this channel. Thank you so much. Like, subscribe, share it around. We have a Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can join the Discord server. I am so entirely grateful for all of the support. And if you haven't seen the rest of my content, please give it a watch. And if you want to taste, look at my shorts tab. You can look at the shorts, and if they seem enticing, go to the connected video. I deeply appreciate that you got all the way to the end of this video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Welcome to the magic place of the ink card. I want to give a shout out to the people doing fan art and my $5 plus patrons you see here. Will you please subscribe and ring the bell as well? Check out this video here next. Please do it for me, sweetie. Mwah.